Hello, this is Brain Part 2. We are going to start with the cerebral cortex. Now, the cerebral cortex, you need to know what it is, but what's more important is you need to know how it's divided up. This is very, there's a lot you need to know about the cerebral cortex. In general, and the red is what I'm thinking you need to kind of know. The main part is that it is the outer wrinkly part of the brain. It is the most advanced part of the brain. Okay. This is where all your neurons are. This is the control center of your brain, especially in the frontal part. Okay. So think of your brain as like, in an evolutionary sense, it is the most advanced part of your brain. Okay, moving right along. Gray matter, that's the most densely packed neurons. Let me show you what that looks like on the next slide. So if we were to take a slice this way, you could see the cerebral cortex isn't very thick, but that is where all the good stuff happens. That's what makes us smart. All this white stuff, as far as we know, it's more connective tissue. That's important too, don't get me wrong. But this gray matter, that's where all the smartness and intelligence comes from. Okay? All right, now hit pause, draw this, write this down. You need to have all of this memorized. This is a lot. Okay? There's a lot of stuff. And some of the stuff you don't know what it is yet. But this is all good stuff. So hit pause, but I'm going to start talking and I will move on in a second. So let's just take frontal lobe is too complicated. Let's just start easy. The occipital lobe. In the back of your brain, above your neck, that is the part of the brain that has the visual cortex, vision. Now, how do I remember that? I always think occipital optical. Occipital optical. If you want to write that down, that's fine. It works for me, but I think of the word optical as in vision. So let me ask you this. If you got a tumor on your occipital lobe, or a stroke that damaged your occipital lobe, or maybe somebody took a nail gun and hit you in the back of your head and damaged your occipital lobe, what would happen to you? Obviously, you would have vision problems. You might go blind. Now, let's talk about your temporal lobe. Now, this is on both sides, okay? You have one around your left ear and your right ear. But this is where your auditory cortex is. So theoretically, if you were to get a tumor or a stroke that damaged your auditory cortex, then you might go deaf, or you might have some other hearing problems. Okay? All right, now your parietal lobe, that's where your sensory cortex is. We'll go over that more in detail in a second, but that's where your touch sensations are. If you get slapped on your left arm, ow, you're going to feel it in your parietal lobe on the right side of your parietal lobe, of your sensory cortex. Frontal lobe, that's where you think about the future. That's where you control yourself. Somebody talks about your mama and you say, you know what, I'm not going to fight this person right now. Maybe later, but not right now. That's your frontal lobe kicking in. We'll that's also where your motor cortex is. We'll get into that in more detail in the next few slides. Okay, moving right along. Pause if you need to. Okay, write this down. So this is part of your frontal lobe. Part of it. Now, I've already said earlier how your frontal lobe is where you control your anger, control your fear, control your impulses. What I meant to say is that your prefrontal cortex, it's a part of your frontal lobe. So I want you to think about this. Think about all the people who are in jail right now because somebody disrespected them and they just couldn't control their rage enough to not go fight or assault or murder somebody. Imagine going to jail and you talk to some prisoner. You're like, that guy was talking smack, so I got into a fight and I accidentally killed the guy, and now I'm in jail for 10 years. You see that? So to me, that's a failure of your prefrontal cortex. Think about why ninth graders get into so many fights, but 11th graders not so much. It's because of lack of frontal lobe development, lack of prefrontal cortex development. Why do young men pay so much more in auto insurance than young women? Because young women have better prefrontal cortex. They don't take a car and drive 80 down when the speed limit is 40. Young women tend to not do that. Neither do old men. That's usually something that only young men do. Young men make bad decisions because of a lack of prefrontal cortex development. Okay? This is where you make your decisions. Also, if you see something scary, that's your amygdala. However, it's your prefrontal cortex that kicks in and says, whoa, chill. Okay, it's okay. All right. So think about Phineas Gage, who destroyed his prefrontal cortex, and he became an alcoholic because he was always like, fear, fear, danger, danger. But that's what happened to Phineas Gage. All right, moving right along. All right, not the easiest question, but I think I explained it good enough. The answer is, all right, so if you're a dumb animal, the most obvious difference would be, what is the part of the brain that's most advanced? The answer is D. Okay. That is not an AP question, but it's still a good one. All right, write this down. So in your frontal lobe, there is a strip called the motor cortex. It's purple on this picture down below. It's in your frontal lobe. This is where you do conscious, purposeful muscular movements. So if I purposefully move my left leg, then my right leg, or I wave my right hand, I'm using my motor cortex. If I am speaking and I'm using my lips and my tongue, that is my motor cortex. I mean, there's a specific part, we'll talk about that in a minute, but your motor cortex is where you do movement. So if you have a stroke and you damage your motor cortex, then you'll be paralyzed. Okay? Not the same kind of paralyzed like when you damage your spine, but imagine if you have a stroke and you can't move your mouth or you can't move your left arm. That's what I mean by that. Same thing if you have a tumor on your motor cortex or you have some other kind of brain damage from a car accident. All right, moving right along. All right, same picture, but different thing. Write it down. So just behind the motor cortex, you have a strip called the sensory cortex, or also called the somatosensory cortex. Soma does show up in your vocabulary a lot. Soma means body. Soma means body. Somatosensory cortex is where you get your touch sensations. your pain, and your pressure. So if you get slapped on your right arm, ow, you'll feel it in your sensory cortex on the right side of your brain, on your right side of your sensory cortex. If I get a burn on my right elbow, I'm going to feel it on the left side of my somatosensory cortex. So this is where you get touch and pain and pressure sensations. So imagine if you had a stroke and your left arm goes numb, the left side of your face goes numb. So that means you're having a stroke on the right side of your sensory cortex. Okay? So remember, it's the common question is what happens if you damage this part of the brain? Remember, your left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. That's true with your motor cortex. It's true with your sensory cortex. Moving right along. So remember, the left side, so if I get slapped on my left arm, ow, the pain or the sensation is going to go to my thalamus and then to the right side of my brain. The thalamus transfers that information to the other side of the brain. I don't think you really need to write this down. Okay. All right, moving right along. Okay, here we go. The answer is planning, thinking about the future. That's what the frontal lobe. They could have said prefrontal cortex as well. Okay. All right, moving right along. Oh boy, this is an interesting question. But I think I explained it pretty well. Okay. All right. Hit pause, take your time. The answer is all right, so you have to know the motor cortex. They all say motor cortex. You got to know it's in the frontal lobe, so that rules out C and D. Now it's left leg, so that means it has to be in the right hemisphere. Right hemisphere means right side of the brain. Left hemisphere means it's on the left side of the brain. Okay, so keep that in mind. You got your one hemisphere is left hemisphere is on the left side, right hemisphere is on the right side. Okay. All right, moving right along. I don't think you need to know the word homunculus, but you do need to understand that your brain dedicates more space to certain parts of the body. I mean, like, think about brain real estate in your sensory cortex and in your motor cortex. Your motor cortex and your sensory cortex dedicate more space to what is big on this: hands, lips, eyes. We have pretty good eyes as humans. Not the greatest. Birds have better eyes, but we have pretty good eyes. Now, if it's small, then the brain doesn't dedicate much space, like the elbow. Elbows are dumb. So let me ask you this. Where would you rather get burned? On your elbows or on your hands? I'd much rather get burned on my elbows. My hands are more sensitive. My lips are more sensitive. More nerve endings there. More brain dedicated to those areas. But my knees, not so, I don't really care. Okay? So, same thing, just not as cool. But your motor cortex and your sensory cortex dedicate more space to certain parts of your body. Hands, yes. Feet, yes. Mouth and lips in your face, yes. Genitals, no. Knees, no. Okay? Same thing. It's just a different way of looking at it. Look at all the space that dedicates to hands. Look at all the space that dedicates to your face. Knees and ankles, toes, not so much. All right, moving right along. All right. Which of the following regions of the body has the largest area of sensory cortex devoted to it? All right. Where would you least want to get burned? The answer is face. You don't want to get burned on your face. You'd rather get burned on your leg. It's less sensitive. Similar question. Which of the following areas of the body has the largest number of sensory neurons? The answer is lips. Why do you think kissing is so much fun? Okay, moving right along. Okay, you already kind of have this written down. Your parietal lobe, we wrote it down with this right here, parietal lobe, touch, pain, pressure, sensory cortex. Okay. Occipital, optical, vision. It contains the visual cortex. This is just a visual. You got your visual cortex back in the occipital lobe, and then you got your auditory cortex near your ears, in your temporal lobes. Okay. All right. If an individual has lost the ability to feel pain in the left arm, there's most likely damage to what area of the brain? Okay, so we're talking about pain here. Left arm. The answer is right parietal lobe. It's the left arm, so it has to be on the right side. Parietal means that's where your sensory cortex is. Okay. All right. Temporal lobes, hearing and language skills. Your language memories are stored most of the time on your left temporal lobe, near your left ear. By the way, if a sound goes in your right ear or your left ear, it'll go to the thalamus, and then it'll be processed on both your left and your right side. Okay. All right. Write all this down. So above your left ear, about 91% of us, our language is stored above our left ear in our left temporal lobe. It's called the Wernicke's area. So when you are reading, you're using your Wernicke's area. When you are listening to me talk to you in English or any other language, you are using your Wernicke's area. If you get a stroke or a tumor and it damages your Wernicke's area, you will not be able to read. You will not be able to understand what I'm saying to you. So if you get a stroke on your Wernicke's area and I'm trying to talk to you, I might sound like this. You won't be able to understand what I'm saying. You have what's called Wernicke's aphasia. If you get a stroke on your left side of your brain and you damage your Wernicke's area, you will have Wernicke's aphasia. You will not be able to understand what people are telling you, talking to you, and you won't be able to read either. So your memory of how to understand language is stored on the left side near your ear in your temporal lobe. Okay. So Wernicke's aphasia, we already wrote this down. Damage to your Wernicke's area, not understanding language. All right, moving right along. Broca's area, write all this down. Okay, Broca's area is still on your left side for 91% of us, maybe more, or maybe, I don't know, it's about 90%. Left side frontal lobe. This is the area of your brain that allows you to speak. I always think, because I know a little Spanish, broca boca, boca broca, speaking, mouth. Boca means mouth. So if you get a stroke and you cannot speak, then you have what's called Broca's aphasia. If the stroke damaged your Broca's area, left side, about where your left temple is, touch your left temple. All right, that's about where your Broca's area is. So it reminds me of my grandma, and she used to like say, she tried to speak and it just didn't come out right. She had a stroke, and she had Broca's aphasia. The stroke affected her ability to speak. Left side, left temple, frontal lobe. Think of this. It's in your, I believe your Broca's area is actually on your motor cortex, and your motor cortex is about purposeful body movement. And this specific spot is just the part of your frontal lobe, the part of your motor cortex that deals with speaking. Your lips, your tongue, that's speaking. You damage it, you won't be able to speak. You'll be like this guy in Breaking Bad who had a stroke and he wasn't able to speak. He still understood language, so his Wernicke's area was working fine. He could still read, but he couldn't speak. He had Broca's aphasia. Okay. All right, moving right along. All right. Damage to a small part of the occipital lobe would most likely result in what? All right, answer that. The answer is occipital optical vision. You get a tumor in the back of your brain, you might go blind, or you'll have vision problems. All right, go ahead and read this. The answer is boca broca speech. Broca's aphasia. All right, so if you develop aphasia as a result of damage to which of the parts of the brain, it could be Broca's, but the answer is Wernicke's. If you have damage on your Wernicke's area, you won't be able to understand language. That's called Wernicke's aphasia. All right. All right, here we go. All right, so Dr. Barnes is studying sounds, processing sounds. So the answer is B, temporal lobes. Okay, write all this down. You need to know, what does the left brain do and what does the right brain do? Left brain, language, la 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 left, la 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 language, la 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 logic. Language, Broca's area, Wernicke's area. Arithmetic, basic math like 3 plus 5, 2 times 7, that's arithmetic. And the left brain controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere of your brain, the right side of your brain, does spatial tasks. Like, will this object fit in the back of the trunk? Can you rotate it in a way to make it fit? That's spatial tasks. Creative task. Are you creative? Are you artistic? Do you have a good sense of humor? Do you enjoy music? Reading people's emotions, reading people's facial expressions. When you read people's facial expressions, you are using the right side of your cerebellum. and the right side, the right hemisphere controls the left side of your body. Okay? All right. All right, just a meme that I keep running into. Spatial tasks are done with the right side of your body. Okay? Think of Tetris, and you rotate stuff so it'll fit. That's the right side of your brain. All right, not an easy question. All right, I'm going to help you with this one. It's not D because MRIs are just black and white. Now, if you have a tingling on the right side of the face, that means it's the left side of your brain that had the stroke. Sudden inability to speak. So that makes you think, oh, okay, it's Broca's area, but they didn't get that specific. The answer is A. Okay, so you either have a tumor or brain damage from a stroke on the left side of your brain. All right. So you might know all this stuff, but one thing you might not know is what is the word empirical. You need to know this word. Empirical means that it's backed by science. Okay, like there's actually strong scientific evidence that the statement is true. So on here, you've got 3 myths about the brain, and you've got one that is factual, empirical. Go ahead and answer. The answer is A. That is based on science. We know based on using an fMRI that your left brain does certain things and your right brain does other things. We can tell that by using an fMRI. But all this other stuff, those are myths. Those are all myths. All right. Blindness could result from damage to which cortex and lobe of the brain? The answer is occipital lobe. Occipital lobe. Moving right along. All right. You're not used to having A through E on here. I usually have been deleting them because in 2024, they made it A through D. I just forgot to do this one. But know that the lower you go on the brain, the less evolved it is. So the old brain, the lower part of the brain, developed first. Your hindbrain, your cerebellum, your medulla, that's the old brain. Moving right along. All right, write this down. Actually change that into brain plasticity. I believe the new curriculum calls it brain plasticity. Not neuroplasticity is fine, but it's brain plasticity. So here's the deal. Brain plasticity is your brain will actually change shape. It won't necessarily heal necessarily, but old parts of your brain will take over for functions that the damaged part used to do. And the younger you are, the better your brain can do this. So if you're going to get brain damage, do it when you're young because your brain will adapt. I've got a video for you, and this is important.
We are beginning to harness the brain's incredible ability to invent itself, then reinvent itself throughout life. This girl is a testament to the amazing resilience of the human brain. Young Jody Miller leads an idyllic life as a 9-year-old girl. You would never guess that she has undergone some of the most drastic surgery imaginable. Jody's first 3 years were textbook normal.
Happy birthday, dear Jody.
Then, about 6 weeks after her 3rd birthday, a storm of epileptic seizures took control of her brain.
She couldn't use her left arm hardly at all. She could barely use the left leg, seizing a good deal of the time, multiple types of seizures.
Ordinary life became impossible. Medicines did nothing, and the seizures threatened to turn fatal. Desperate, Jody's parents brought her to pediatric neurologist Eileen Vining.
We found her seizures were all coming from her right hemisphere. And we knew that there is virtually nothing else, nothing but Rasmussen syndrome that can produce that picture in a young child.
Rasmussen syndrome is a degenerative brain disorder that disrupts the electrical activity that makes our brains work. Tiny electrical explosions were flaring up in Jody's right hemisphere. As seizures became almost constant, she lost control of her left side. Only one radical treatment option remained.
We knew that she was never going to have her seizures controlled with medicine, and we knew that she and her family faced taking out that half of the brain.
Okay.
Dr. Vining recommended a daring surgery called a hemispherectomy. It would be performed by pediatric neurosurgeon Ben Carson.
The whole concept of taking out half of a person's brain would seem to most people impossible. Human beings are incredible creatures with a brain that is beyond belief in terms of its capabilities, to the point where we can take half of it out and still function in a normal way.
85% of our brain consists of the cerebral cortex, which is divided into 2 hemispheres, each with 4 main lobes. The cortex handles many of our higher functions. Areas on both sides control thinking, movement, and sensation. But the right side controls our left side and vice versa. Jody would lose almost all of her right hemisphere, and the cavity would fill with cerebrospinal fluid. The operation has to be performed with great precision to avoid damaging the parts of the brain that control Jody's life functions, like heartbeat and breathing. The surgery went flawlessly.
What we're looking at here is an image, an MRI, that was done on Jody after her surgery. And what it shows us is the fact that we removed her entire right hemisphere. And what we're able to see here is indeed her very normal left hemisphere and all the beautiful gyri of her cortex. And we can see right down the middle, the right hemisphere that was there is now replaced by fluid.
But how could Jody function normally with only one hemisphere? It's because of a miraculous ability of the brain called plasticity. Our brains can actually change shape, creating new connections between neurons or brain cells to replace lost or damaged ones. Jody's left brain started reconnecting almost immediately.
At least as good as this. And if I remember, he wore pink just like you. This young lady had half her brain removed, went home, I guess maybe 10 days later, and was already walking. She was ambulating. She was able to walk out of the hospital. And that's because her left hemisphere had such resilience, such plasticity. It was able to say, okay, something needs to move her left leg. Whoa. You gonna open it? Okay.
Jody continues to work on training her brain to overcome the slight paralysis in her left side.
But enough. Now that's very good. You need to do that stretching stuff, honey. You know that, don't you? Are you doing enough of it? You think so?
The human brain is...
Okay, so brain plasticity. Brain plasticity, it's your brain, the healthy portions take over for the function of damaged portions. So if my grandma got a stroke and she's talking, And then 15 years later, she's like, you kids get out of, she's starting to be able to talk a little bit. Her brain isn't exactly healing, but it kind of is, because her healthy portions of her brain are taken over for the damaged sections. Now, if you're going to get brain damage, do it when you're young. If you wait till you're old, it's not going to happen as good. Okay? The younger you are, the better able your brain is able to do it. Now, the word plastic, think of soft plastic, not hard plastic. Think of flexibility. Okay? All right. All right. The answer is B. I think in 2024 they changed it to brain plasticity. Okay. All right. This is not an easy question, but the answer is okay. So the answer has to do with damaging the brain. And A looks good, but it's not about neurons. It's about the whole brain. So the answer is B. That's a tricky question. Okay. C and D are not about brain damage. So that's why it's not C or D. Tricky, tricky, tricky. All right, we're about to wrap this up. The corpus callosum is one more part of the brain you might see. The corpus callosum allows the left side of your brain to communicate with the right side. Now, I will mention a surgery. Sometimes when you have major seizures, now the little girl you just saw, they took out half her brain, but sometimes they might cut the corpus callosum. All right, moving right along here. And that's a pretty cool picture. Imagine taking your brain and stretching it left side and right side, and you stretch it apart, and you may see, look at all the wires, okay? But the corpus callosum allows the left side of your brain to communicate with the right side of your brain, okay? So the two cerebral hemispheres that are connected by a band of fibers, that is called the corpus callosum. It allows the left side to communicate with the right side. In extreme cases, surgically severing or cutting the corpus callosum. Why do you do it? Because of seizures. So you do it because of epilepsy. Okay. I really don't want to get into split brain. It takes so much time, and I haven't really seen it, but if you cut the corpus callosum, the left side of your brain and your right side of the brain become independent of each other, and some really weird things happen. Okay? All right, I'm stopping the video. That's enough.